Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the kind words. And yeah, so especially when we're doing Zoom kind of things, I welcome questions because it's the one way I have to make sure that everybody or that anybody is awake. So anyway, I just we'll talk about. I'm taking a lot of this information from a one or 2 day workshop that we have called Cold Water Workshop, and I've picked and chosen things that I can sort of knock off, hopefully within 45 minutes, and we'll just move along here. Whenever I talk about anything going out in wilderness at all, I talk about the three P's to put everything in here. And the three P's are prepare, prevent, and perform. So you should anytime you go somewhere, you should prepare for the reasonable worst case scenario. And I'm sure that many, if not most, if not all of you, have these principles. But again, if you knew everything I was going to talk about, thered be no use me talking. So I have to assume that there's something that some of you who might be newer to this area can learn. So the other number one, the second P, which is the most important one, which is to prevent any incidents. But of course, prevention doesn't work all the time. And so the bottom line is if something happens, if an event does happen, you need to be able to perform if you have an incident. And of course, performance, and I think this is the only time I'm going to talk about it. I don't think I have worked it in here, but performance is based on two things. One is your preparation. Did you learn stuff? Do you have the right equipment and whatever? But you can have all the stuff in the world, but if you forget it all or lose it all when your incident happens, then all that is useless. So it's on your preparation as well as your ability to remember what to do, not panicking, and performing whatever it is we teach you. So the principles of this presentation are the things I'm going to tell you will work for most of the people in most of the scenarios, most of the time. There's always some, perfect storm scenario where everything's gone really bad and it's just a bad day for you and nothing will work. But in general, these things will work. So interesting. I think I got introduced to this I gave another talk for a group out in BC, the cold water, I don't know exactly, can't remember the name now, but the Cold Water Swimming Association in BC. And I think this has kind of started in the last 10 years or so, where people are actually getting in really cold water on purpose and actually swimming. So I'm going to say it's relatively new. Interesting that the risks, and this isn't relevant for you necessarily, but I'm going to bring the comparison to kayakers in a moment. So for now, just assume I have some logical train of thought here. So the risks for this are paradoxical actually, and that is that more experienced swimmers may be at greater risk of incapacitation. And we'll talk about there's three major phases of cold water immersion. The second one is incapacitation. And any idea why this is? Anybody? Here's our first test to see if anybody's still awake. Why might a more experienced cold ice water swimmer be at a greater risk? Anybody?
You move more and exert more energy.
Well, yep. So you are moving more and exerting more energy, exactly. And the reality is, the more experience you get, the tougher you get, the more acclimatized you get to the cold water, so you can swim longer, so you can get into more trouble. And it's very interesting that there have been cases where someone's just been swimming along fairly well and just boom, like that, they are either unconscious or incapacitated. It can come on very, very quickly. So just keep that in mind. And basic principles of doing this, where you're purposely going in the cold water, but it should be, if you're going to be out kayaking in cold water, again, prepare for the reasonable worst case scenario, which is, well, I could dump my boat, I could end up in the water, It could be cold. It's really it's really handy if you have a healthy heart and body before you get into this. And the other thing is that you want to gradually increase your exposure. Probably best not to get new members in the middle of January, both in your swimming and kayaking. People need to get gradually acclimatized to water as it gradually gets colder. And safety, never do this alone. Certainly, I could say that for kayakers as well. And beware after exit. And if you've been out paddling in cold weather and you're really cold, you don't have to be immersed to have this problem. Often when you get out, and probably many of you have experienced this, you're paddling along and you get to shore and everything's fine. And then 5, 10, 15 minutes later, you're uncontrollably shivering. And that's because you're experiencing an afterdrop, which is a decrease in core temperature, which might not be good for you. So this is, I thought I just pulled this out about 10 minutes before I joined the meeting here. I remember that John Hayward, many of you hopefully will remember the name John Hayward. He was a professor at UVic. He, along with Mustang Survival, developed the UVic float coat. And we wrote a paper together about a rowing team from the UVic who swamped, and the water was 4 degrees, and they were only in the water for 50 minutes. Normally, I would say you're not going to get very hypothermic in 50 minutes, but these folks don't have much clothing on, not much insulation. And if you look here, you've got, can you see my cursor moving around?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So you can see here, 2 rowers died, and 2 of the coldest rowers were 23.4 and 25 degrees rectal temperature. That's really cold. Anything below 28, and it's a crapshoot as to whether you survive or not. So you can think of many scenarios where if you're out in the ocean and you dump your boat, you could well be. It doesn't take much imagination to come up with a scenario where you're in the water for 50 minutes. And some colleagues from BC and I are just in the midst of publishing another case study about someone a kayaker in Okanagan Lake was in the water for 50 minutes, and his core temperature was down there too. And so it doesn't take a huge amount of time. I'm going to go through this. I'm just going to go on to here. So this is the red line is a core temperature. And if for someone who ends up in cold water, and time 0 is when they get into cold water. So don't worry about the temperature of the water or the exact time limits. The timing this is a general rule of thumb that again will work for most, the average adult, average weight kind of thing. And core temperature starts off at 37, and you'll notice that there's actually a blip here. Core temperature actually goes up for 5, 10, even 15 minutes before it starts going down, even in 4-degree water. So that should be the first hint that one of the things I'm going to be telling you about is you're not going to become hypothermic in minutes, because your core temperature is actually going to go up. And then it starts to go down, and a couple of things happen here. So 35, so 37 Celsius is the average normal core temperature. 35 is the threshold for mild hypothermia. And, again, a textbook number I give is about 30 minutes. If you're adequately clothed for the climate you're in, it will take about 30 minutes. And it doesn't matter. So when I give you any of these times, don't get all uptight about that. It doesn't matter whether you could be hypothermic in 20 minutes or it might take 40 minutes. The point is, it doesn't happen in a few minutes. Okay. We'll refer to this to another threshold of 30 degrees. At about 30 degrees is when you lose consciousness. And 28 degrees right here is the threshold for severe hypothermia. And one of the reasons for that threshold is below 28 degrees, the heart is at risk for ventricular fibrillation or cardiac arrest. And so if your head's above the water and you can breathe, hypothermia is your main health problem. And the heart is the organ at risk during hypothermia. Okay, so let's move along here. I'm going to tell you something here. Most cold water deaths. One of the things I'm trying to fight here, and I'm always doing that, is fighting this old wives' tale or the myth that you can become hypothermic in minutes. And we've heard, but the reality is many people who die in cold water die early on. So most cold water deaths are due to drowning because you couldn't keep your head above the water. But as you can see in this time zone, your core temperature is close to normal. And few cold water deaths actually happen due to hypothermia. So I tell people, if you fall in cold water, you would be lucky to live long enough to die of hypothermia, because that's going to take an hour or two or more. And of course, the only way you're going to do that is if you have some kind of flotation. Nobody can swim for an hour in 0 or 4 degree water. So just want to debunk some cold water myths. And one is about the speed of hypothermia. I just saw something on TV in the last 2 days where they said they become hypothermic in a couple of minutes. Well, that's impossible. Anyway, so here's Merck manual. Sudden immersion in very cold water may cause fatal hypothermia in 5 to 15 minutes. Well, you can die in 5 to 15 minutes, but absolutely not due to hypothermia. So this is a still photo taken from a training video from US Rowing, and I'm not throwing them under the bus because they have asked me to give them feedback, and they've upgraded their video now, so they don't say this anymore. But this was very common back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. And here they're talking about making a big issue of the fact that this rower could become hypothermic in just a few minutes. Well, that's not going to happen. The other thing they talk about is talking about how important heat loss from your head is. Now, I don't want to minimize the importance of insulating your head. I don't go anywhere without a toque in the cold. I don't necessarily wear it, but I want to have one because I like my head to feel comfortable. But you should know you're not going to become hypothermic through your head. And I just point back to this picture. You see this person's got very thin clothing on. From the neck down, she's in, let's say it's 10 degree water, and her head is out of the water, and let's say the air temperature is 15 degrees. Where do you think most of her heat loss is coming from? Her head or the rest of her body? She's probably losing 90% of her heat loss or more through her body. Anyway, this is just the fact that we've got lots of myths here. And so back to this hypothermia thing, this is not kayaking, obviously, but there's a lot we have heard in all 3 of Canada's oceans where we've done productions and interviewed people. And some of the common things they say is, we won't last long anyway. That's why I don't need to wear a PFD. So this is 8 degree water. We have this guy dumped in here. Just listen to him, if you can. At least watch him. He's breathing heavily. But he's certainly not dying. He might be in trouble if he didn't have a PFD on. So we purposely told the boat driver to stay away for 2 minutes because we think that most people can be, if it's a witness person overboard, they're gonna be found and rescued within a couple of minutes. There's lots of people who think, well, I wouldn't survive that long anyway, so I don't want to go through the pain. If I'm going to die anyway, I just might as well die quickly. So, so here now, 2 minutes later, you can see if you can look, his breathing is better.
Talk like you would normally.
And here he comes. This is in northern Quebec. Is in a place called Saluit, I believe. So you won't recognize, most of you won't recognize the language or be able to make out.
On three. One, two, three.
So, it's taking a couple of steps, but as you see later on, we're going to say that you get someone with cold water, you really want to not have them walk around very much, and we'll talk about why in a few moments. So I think it's important to just recognize, how do we lose heat? There are 4 mechanisms, and your core temperature is based on a balance between heat loss and heat gain. So we'll talk about heat gain for a moment. There's heat production. Right now, we're all producing about 100 watts of heat. And I think we know if we exercise, we feel warmer because we're burning energy in our muscles, and 80% of that energy is wasted as heat, just like your car engine. Shivering is a thermoregulatory mechanism, involuntary muscle activity that produces heat, and we could add heat from the outside. And here are the 4 mechanisms of heat loss. And this picture shows what they are. Conduction is either through direct contact with a solid or a liquid. I think I said conduction. If I didn't, it is conduction. Convection is flowing of water or air across the skin, removes heat. So I think we all are quite familiar with wind chill. But also in water, if water is moving past us, you lose heat much faster than if the water is still. Radiation is just radiation of heat through space or air by infrared radiation. And right now, most of us are losing all of us are losing most of our heat through radiation, because we're not sitting on anything cold. It's not windy where we are, and you're probably not sweating or evaporating. And evaporation is a change from liquid to gas. From a liquid to a gas requires energy, and that heat, if water is on your skin and it evaporates, that heat is coming from your skin. So that's why you feel cooler when you're wet. So that's something that when you're kayaking, it's something to keep in mind. If you're wearing a long sleeve shirt, for instance, and it gets wet, and you're going to be losing heat through evaporation from that. And you can lose quite a bit of heat through evaporation. So just something if you start to feel really cold, you might put a windbreaker on or something like that, not for the insulation value, but to decrease evaporative heat loss. You could imagine if you get out of a swimming pool with a wet T-shirt on, you'll feel cold because you're evaporating. But if you took punched a hole in a garbage bag so you could put it over your head, as soon as you put that over your body, you wouldn't be evaporating anymore. I think I'm going to pass this here. So let's get to the bottom line here. So when we get into cold water, I said earlier there are 3 phases of cold water immersion. Sometimes there's a 4th one, so we're going to go through them right now. So to think about the 3 phases, and if you ever repeat this or try to remember, please use the terms that I'm going to give you. But anyway, one way to think about it is, if I fall in the water, as time goes by, what gets cold? So if I immediately fall in, the first thing that's going to happen is my skin gets cold. If I stay in for, a number of minutes, 5 minutes or more, obviously the underlying tissues like my muscles and nerves are going to get cold. And if I stay even longer, like half an hour or more, eventually the core will get cold. So the first phase, and each phase is based on these areas getting cold. So when the skin gets cold, we have what's called the cold shock response. It lasts up to 1 or 2 minutes, usually 30 to 45 seconds. And basically it's a gasp followed by hyperventilation or continued heavy breathing and an increase in cardiac work. That's why I said earlier on that if you're going to be doing this stuff, you should have a healthy heart. that increased cardiac work, if you have some underlying heart disease, could put you into cardiac arrest. So it's just something to, elderly folks, you just might keep that in mind. Okay, so by the way, the gasp and hyperventilation, well, I'm sure we've all experienced that, and then you're breathing hot and heavy after that. Basically, that is something that will go away in 30, 40, 60 seconds, but you can actually shorten it by just forcing yourself to concentrate on taking some slow, deep breaths. You take 2 deep breaths, you will break that physiological response. And when you're breathing uncontrollably, it's very difficult to control your movements. It's very difficult to think properly. So that is worth doing. We tell people, if you fall in cold water, if you can just survive the first minute, you're really, that's really your initial goal. And you can do that by controlling your breathing. When the muscles and nerves get cold, we call this cold incapacitation. In this case, it'll kind of start in 2 minutes and get worse, continually get worse, for up to 20 minutes until you become completely incapacitated. And this causes weakness and incoordination, of course. And this is because when muscle fibers and nerve fibers get cold, they don't work as well. They don't carry the signals as well. The nerve fibers don't carry the signals as well, and your muscle fibers just don't work as well. And that's why we are incoordinated and weak. And if you stay longer, mild hypothermia kicks in after about 30 minutes. And there's that, for an otherwise healthy person, that is not a major health hazard. But of course, you need to get out of the cold, because you stay an hour, you'll be twice as cold. Oh, excuse me. Okay, so there you go. So
Again, we've got a question here from Clark.
Go ahead, Clark. Thanks, Kevin. Hello, Dr. Giesbrecht.
Hello.
The cold shock response, it sounds similar to me to the diving response that I've learned about through cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, where they recommend that if you're feeling nervous, you can stick your head in a bucket of cold water, or take an ice cube out of the freezer and put it on your forehead, and that will focus your energy, I believe, if I got it right, into your body core to distract your emotions from what might be going on bothering you. Does that make sense? Is that the same kind of thing?
Yeah, and so same thing if you punched yourself in the face or drove a nail through your hand, that would certainly distract you from what was bothering you. Yep. I would say there's a couple things in your statement there. I would never just don't put your head in a bucket of water. That's not a great idea, because the cold shock response is a gasp. Now, the dive response, which of course is much more prevalent in diving mammals, is a breath hold response. So normally when, if you do something artificially and just cool your face, then you might sort of tend to hold your breath. But in our scenarios, kayaking, swimming, whatever, your head and your body are going into the water. So while your head cooling might favor the dive response, which is breath holding, the rest of your body is screaming out with the cold shock response, telling you to gasp and hyperventilate. So this is why we tell folks, sometimes you end up in cold water, you had no warning, you were doing something, next thing you know, you're in the water. But often you have at least a short period of recognition that something's going to happen, and you might be able to control how you get in, how you end up in the water, and do whatever you can to keep your head out of the water. Because of course, if your head goes underwater and you have the cold shock response and you gasp, then you drown, and then you'll never make it to the other.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks very much. That's pretty clear.
Okay, thanks. So cold shock response, cold incapacitation, hypothermia. And so if you stay in long enough, you will always go through those 3 phases. The rescue collapse there's post-rescue collapse or whatever. There's lots of terms, but this is a phenomenon that happens just before, during, or after rescue. And the symptoms can go anywhere in a spectrum from falling down, physically collapsing, to fainting, to dying due to cardiac arrest. And I believe that in that paper that I wrote with Dr. Hayward, one of those 2 deaths was post-rescue collapse. The person died very shortly after the rescue occurred. So I'm going to show you a video here of a gal that we were doing a demonstration, some demonstration videos in Alaska. This water is, it's 8 or 10 degrees, I can't remember. And we didn't tell her exactly what we wanted her to do, but she knew that she was going to be jumping in cold water. She's a volunteer who worked for the state of Alaska, which makes you wonder, did she really volunteer or not? But anyway, so let's watch and listen to this gal. Let's get the volume right up. And so she is in the water a total of 2.5 minutes. And I'm going to ask you some questions at the end of this, so I'd really like people to throw out some answers. And you know, the video is spliced, so the video is not 2.5 minutes, but just know that when she does get the shore, it's 2.5 minutes. Okay, here we go.
Go. Rolling, go.
So hopefully you noticed the cold shock response and an astoundingly quick end of that response. Now she's just going to swim.
Oh God! Oh God! Okay. Okay, honestly, I can't move anything. Oh God! When I first.
Okay, so appreciate this video. This is like my #1 favorite video that I own. Because it's so educational. So what is her problem here right now? She can't move anything. She can't get out.
Incapacitation.
Okay, I heard one person say incapacitation. I missed what the other person said.
Her leg froze, or her body froze.
So yeah, incapacitation. So remember now, it's 8 or 10 degree water, and she's been in there for 2.5 minutes. So she's not hypothermic. So let's just listen. We interviewed her for a while here, and then we'll get back to
Jumping. It was just insane. I couldn't control my breath. I couldn't do anything. And then all of a sudden I could breathe again. Like it was like I hit a threshold. And then I could breathe, and it helped if I closed my eyes because I could concentrate on just my breath. And I don't know, I just kept swimming and now I can't feel anything.
Okay, so you were swimming fairly decently right till you got to the beach here.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Well, once I could feel the bottom, it's just like my body gave up. That was it. I could have gone farther though, if I hadn't hit the rocks.
So how can you explain?
Oh, okay, hang on. We'll listen to a little bit more.
explain it. You could have swam farther, but when you got to safe ground, you just collapsed. Can you explain that, or how it felt, or?
Oh, all of a sudden, I stopped thinking about my breath, because that's really all I was thinking about, was my breath, breathing. But once I hit the rocks, I knew that I didn't have to, I wasn't concentrating on my breathing anymore. And then I couldn't feel the rest of my body. Like that's when I started thinking about my arms and my legs.
Okay, so I'll ask again, why could she not get out of the water? By the way, we had to carry her out of the water, so she never did get out on her own. What was her problem?
Her muscles and nerves were now cold.
So muscles and nerves are cold, yeah, and that's caused cold incapacitation. Anybody want to invoke any other phases here?
Yeah, phase 4, but I can't remember what you called it when.
Oh, just call it rescue collapse.
Thank you. Yes.
So we thought that this was, while we were doing this, but first of all, we were hoping that we would demonstrate cold incapacitation and swim failure. Like we had several people all around. We were expecting, to run out and grab her and have to bring her in, but she swam much further than we thought. We weren't expecting her to get to the shore here, and so she said, as soon as she was swimming fine, and as soon as her feet hit the rocks, her body gave up, and that is rescue collapse. And there's a number of factors involved here, but the initial factor is when you're stressed, you're pumping out adrenaline or epinephrine. I think most of us have heard of it's the same hormone, but it's old and new names. And adrenaline helps two things happen. It helps us maintain blood pressure, and it also allows our muscle fibers to be stronger and do things. We've all heard the story. Under pressure, you lift the car up because your kid is under the car, doing superhuman things. So you're able to do things you normally wouldn't be able to do, and then your feet hit the rocks, or you hit shore, or somebody grabs you, or rescue is in sight, and you relax, you stop pumping out adrenaline, and your blood pressure drops because adrenaline helps maintain blood pressure, and now your muscle fibers can't do what they were doing before. And that's what you saw right here. I mean, just think of that. She's laying in about 8 inches of water, 4 feet from shore. And she's a very well-motivated gal, young gal, healthy gal. And she said, I can't move anything. And I really wanted to go and say, okay, if your life depended on it, surely you can crawl up on shore. But at that point, all of her colleagues who were out of the camera shot here were all steaming mad at me because they thought I had just about killed their friend. And some of them were straight state troopers carrying loaded firearms. So I didn't figure I should test my luck. And I joked that Megan, this is Megan is her name, and her parents have a permanent APB out for me in the state of Alaska because they're not very happy with me. But so there's a couple things. So you've seen the cold shock response, and it should be obvious you're wondering, okay, how relevant is this? This gal was in water for 2.5 minutes. And you can think, yeah, sure, she was swimming, expending energy, but you can think that if you dump your kayak in cold water, 8 degrees, I'm sure 8 degrees is a pretty common temperature for you to be in. If you're struggling in waves and stuff for 2.5 minutes, you are in this territory right here. You're not hypothermic. Your heart's not going to stop because it's cold, but you might drown because you're either incapacitated or you have rescue collapse. So let's hear what else she has to say.
Legs and my torso and how absolutely freezing it was.
Okay, so it felt cold. Anything else? Pain, numbness?
Very painful. Not really numb, just it felt like my whole body was on fire. Yeah. Okay. And then it still feels like it's on fire, actually.
And you couldn't get up?
No way. I couldn't move anything.
What were you saying there before they picked you up? Because I was just coming over here. Do you remember?
No.
Okay.
Uh-uh.
So you got up, you felt you collapsed, and you were felt like your whole body was on fire.
Yeah.
Anything else to add to that?
No, my brain's not working very well right now.
Okay, that's all right. And you feel you look like you're starting to shiver.
Yeah.
You're just noticing that yourself?
Uh-huh.
Describe what you feel like right now. Why do you feel different that you're starting to shiver, or is that just coming in?
Now it's less burning and more just really, really cold.
And you're shivering like crazy.
I'm cold.
All right.
Oh.
You think you can get up and walk?
Okay, so now you have, let me finish what I'm going to say, and then John, you can ask a question. So she said she's feeling really, really cold, and she's shivering. Anybody want to guess why? I did mention the word. This is after drop. So
muscles are trying to produce heat.
Well, no, you shiver because you're trying to produce heat, right? But the signal for that is that you're cold. And she wasn't shivering when she first got out, so her skin was cold. Her core was probably not. Well, it was. Let's say it's still 37, but her legs and arms are very cold, right? And now she's sitting there, and blood is flowing through those cold lips, cooling off and coming back to the heart, and that's going to the brain. And so her core temperature is actually dropping as she's been talking here. It probably was the same as when she jumped in when she got to shore, and it might have dropped half a degree while she's sitting here on shore. And of course, that's causing her to shiver. So you've seen the cold shock response. You've seen it disappear quite dramatically. You have seen the post-rescue collapse, and now you're seeing after drop. And now you're going to see, oh, John, sorry. John.
Yeah. Hi, just a comment. It can happen very quick, the incapacitation. I was once doing a demonstration whereby I lost the use of my arms, I would say within 30 seconds. I didn't have the benefit of adrenaline because I wasn't too concerned about it. I was still able to kick and swim backwards, but my arms were completely useless within about 30 seconds. No wetsuit, no dry suit. And I would guess probably about 8 to 10 degrees of water.
Okay, that's an outlier, I would say. I'm not doubting it. So there is, again, as I said, there's variation. Maybe I didn't say this. There's individual variability in all of these numbers, and for some people it can happen quicker. So that's a good lesson, as word to the wise. Even though the gal can swim for 2.5 minutes.
And I would say it can happen to anybody because I am typically quite warm, and I have been in very cold water previously without incident.
Yeah, so
this was an anomaly, but it can happen to anyone.
Yeah, something else was going on there, but that invokes another saying I have. The fact that something is rare means absolutely nothing to the person it happens to, because at that point it's 100% for them. Okay, Kevin, did you have another question?
Yeah, just something that's come up in the chat, and I'm sure others are thinking it, which is how much difference does a wetsuit and dry suit, and is there a difference between them, make to a situation like this? I mean, certainly our clubs, and I'll certainly speak for ours, but certainly the other clubs that I know also require some form of immersion gear for any club trips,
and
pretty
so
much year round. Yeah.
So you should, yeah. So any insulation is better than none. And a wetsuit is good, but a dry suit is better. And at some point, what I'm going to say isn't going to quite work, but in general, a thinner dry suit is better than a thicker wetsuit. I will do whatever I will put up with almost anything to be in a dry suit. But it has to be a thin one so that you don't overheat, so that you can actually, a paddling dry suit doesn't have any insulation in it. It just has the material, and otherwise you wouldn't be able to paddle in it for hours at a time. So dry is warm and warm is happy. Okay, so here So you've seen this gal fall apart after 2.5 minutes, but we gotta end it with the upbeat here. So she's been sitting out here for about 5 minutes now. She's having an after drop. Her core temperature is decreasing. And remember I said earlier on when we were talking about the cold water swim, you have to be cognizant that when you get out of the water, or even if you've been out on a long day and didn't tip your boat, but it's been cold and the wind's been blowing, the next 15 minutes, things could go downhill for you. So that's what you've just seen here. And that can be actually quite significant. And so here we go, let's finish this up.
Possibly. Can't really feel my feet.
Do you want to try?
Sure.
Let's see if you can get up on your own and just see how it goes.
Okay. Oh, my arms are really...
Here, let's take this off for now. And let's say you just swam up on the shore and you were... Can you get up?
All my joints are really, really stiff. And I feel like I can't... I feel like I don't have any muscle control. I feel kind of silly.
That's okay.
Oh. Yeah, if I crack my head on the rocks.
No, we'll watch it, but just so you get a demonstration of.
It's really like I have to concentrate on like trying to move my feet forward.
Someone help him back up.
Oh, it's really hard to move my legs.
So just walk over here. We're just going to see if you can make it over here, and if you feel that you're feeling faint or weak, just tell us.
Okay. Yeah, I can't imagine doing this in a real life situation. For being all by yourself.
Very nice job. Really nice demo.
So you notice how fast she was walking there at the end. So again, all her friends thought that I just about killed her 5 minutes before that. And they were all standing with their mouths open as they watched her walk by. So because it was a short period in the water, all of the effects were minor. But now if you're in the water for half an hour, all of these things just get much more significant. I was going to say something else about that. I can't remember what. These are all the things we've learned here. She had gasping, hyperventilation. Her swimming was very inefficient at that point. Her swimming movements just kept her mouth out of the water. But once her hyperventilation stopped, again, you can control all your other body movements much better when you are controlling your breathing. She had good forward motion, contact with shore, not cold incapacitation, but mild case of rescue collapse because of mental relaxation, decreased adrenaline or epinephrine, and a physical collapse. So there you go. Just an interesting comment here to back up what I said earlier on. Okay, Catriona, I'll get your question in one moment. This is one study of a bunch of cold water deaths in England, and where they knew what the cause was. And as you can see, 56% happened either due to cold shock or cold incapacitation. Only about a quarter happened because of hypothermia, which means these folks must have had a PFD on. And 17%, which is 1 in 6, were caused by rescue collapse. And that now I remember, I'll finish this point and then I'll get to the question. So I was going to say, we got her to stand up because we wanted to show that physically she could recover quickly because she was only in the water for 2.5 minutes. And if you're by yourself, you're gonna have to get up, you're gonna have to do what your next survival actions are. But if you're with a group, you do not get the person to stand up and walk around, because that can cause further rescue collapse. And I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. So don't think of that video. The only part of that video that's useless is the example of getting up and walking after you've been in cold water. Catriona, go.
Hi, Dr. Giesbrecht. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Maybe you're going to talk about this next. 2.5 weeks ago in a dragon boat, we lost our coach in the water. And I think we got her back into the boat within, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 minutes. And so we got her back in quick. But I think she was so embarrassed, you know, to have had that happen to her in front of the whole team. She started insisting, I have merino wool, I'm fine. So no dry suit, no wetsuit, merino wool. Let's finish the practice, which became
Well,
a big.
who fell in the water?
Our coach.
Oh, I thought you said pooch. I thought your dog fell in the water.
No, our coach.
Your coach. Okay, got it.
She was so embarrassed about it and said, let's finish the practice. And sense prevailed that we went back and took her back to the dock, which took some time. And a nurse, one of the gals on our team is a nurse, and escorted her up to the car, but she insisted that, no, I'm fine, I'm warm enough. And, you know, wasn't even going to change her clothes. I'm wondering, based on this slide here, if then, you know, could it have gotten worse if you're left in those cold clothes for a long time, or you know,
so what was the water temperature?
About 8 degrees.
Yeah. Okay. So the wet clothes, once you get out and keeping them on, yes, you will have more heat loss, but not as much as when you're in the water. So her main cold exposure was the 6 minutes in 8-degree water. So you're not going to die after being in the water. You might collapse, but you're not going to have a cardiac arrest after 6 minutes in the water, or it'd be a very rare event.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
So you know, after 5 or 6 minutes, yeah, sure, because people go for cold water swims in ice water for longer than that, you know. But if you know that somebody's been in the water for like half an hour or so, then now you treat them like a patient for sure. And so here's a good, this is actually, you've now brought a really good example for my rule for this, which I really just kind of developed maybe in the last year or so as I've been thinking about this. When can somebody die from rescue collapse? And my kind of rule is this: if you see somebody fall in the water and you can get to them in a reasonable amount of time, then you can do what your coach did. No problem, probably. However, if you're responding to a call, then you need to think that by the time you get there, your patient could very well be a victim of rescue collapse. Does that principle make any sense to you?
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's so, you know, you're a recreational kayaking club or organization, but I imagine that probably some of you might be involved in some kind of search and rescue profession. So the rule is, if you see somebody fall in and you get to them relatively quickly, all right, sure, get some dry clothes on and keep going. Doing some exercise will warm you up. But if you're responding to someone, absolutely, when they get to shore, they do not stand up. And you'll see why here in a moment. Oh, I'll get to that. So, okay, so we've taken some time. Kevin, you can let me know here. I can do 2 other things that are fairly important. I know it's 3 minutes to the hour, so give me some guidance.
We're good. I don't think people are going to be bothered if you want to go a little bit overtime. That's not a problem at all. I was just putting my hand up because there's a question that came up in the chat, which was, and you may get to this, what are the key steps to take and in what order once you do get somebody out of the water?
Okay, I'll do that later. Okay, so
Okay.
I'm gonna move through this too. So I'm gonna, that was well, I will, this is I had the opportunity to go on David Letterman's show in 2004, where I introduced this 1-10-1 principle. Being on this show made me come up with how can I summarize the information about that relates to these three phases, and here it is. So and so the 1-10-1 principle, and if you talk about this, can you please call it the 1-10-1 principle? Period. People call it the 1-10-60, and the reason that stop, drop, and roll is ubiquitous everywhere because it's always presented exactly the same way. So here we go. If you fall in cold water, don't panic because you've got 1 minute to get your breathing under control. Stop, take some deep breaths, 10 minutes of meaningful movement, and then or 30 seconds if it's a rare event like one of your colleagues had there, and 1 hour before you become unconscious due to hypothermia. And the main point here is you're not going to die of hypothermia. So all the more reason that you can believe you should not panic. Take some deep breaths, and that will calm everything down. You'll still feel terrible, but then at least you can control your thinking and you can control your movements. This is a guy who just did what we said and survived. Here is basically, we have a video that I don't have time to show you, but basically it relates to core temperature, what happens in cold water if you're wearing a high thermal protection like a survival suit, a dry suit. Well, let's start here. If you don't have any flotation and no thermal protection, like many rowers, you're going to cool very quickly. The event will be very short. If you have like a life jacket, a PFD on, but just regular clothing, like that rower you saw there with their head out of the water, you will cool slower. And if you have flotation and moderate thermal protection, like a wetsuit or a thin dry suit, you will last longer. And this is perfect. You got a survival suit on, but of course you can't kayak in the survival suit. We don't have time for this video. I just want to get to the, so here we're going to talk about, I'm just going to leave this up so I can move quickly. So you can see care of the victim. So once you get somebody out of the water, which when you're kayaking, it's basically, you're going to have to drag them to shore unless you can help them get into their kayak, which is difficult, but possible, I guess. You want to be, the two words you have to remember, gentle and horizontal. You want to treat them gently. Don't be dragging like that gal when Megan was brought to shore there. You didn't hear me, but I was telling them, okay, guys, go slow, take it easy, just pick her up. Because if I hadn't, they thought she was dying. They would have grabbed her by the scruff of the neck and dragged her across the rocks until they found a place where they thought it was appropriate to now do whatever life-saving they needed to do. And in someone who's been in the water for half an hour or 40 minutes, being dragged across the rocks could put you into ventricular fibrillation. So a cold heart, mechanical stimulation can put it into ventricular fibrillation. And horizontal, basically, it's harder to maintain your blood pressure when you're hanging like this than when you're horizontal. And remember, when you're cold, it's even more difficult. And adrenaline might help you maintain your blood pressure, squeezing blood out of the legs when you're in the water. But now you get out of the water, and water is exerting pressure on your legs, squeezing blood up into the core. And when you get out, you don't have that water squeezing your legs anymore. You lose the constrictive effect of adrenaline, and now your blood pressure goes down. So now you've got a cold heart, the blood pressure is going down, so the heart has to work harder. And as you know now, the temperature is going down. And so get a cold heart, getting colder, working harder, a perfect recipe for death. So I got 3 slides I'm going to go through here, and that should do it. I want to explain after drop as it relates to post-rescue collapse, because it's very important. So basically, here's a model that you got a torso and legs, and warm, lots of blood flowing, through the legs. If you get cold, you have peripheral vasoconstriction, primarily in the legs. So you decrease blood flow to the legs. The legs get colder than the core. Well, colder than they were. And now, if you do something to increase blood flow to those legs, like allow a person to stand up, or even, hold them up vertically, now you've got more blood going to colder tissue. That blood cools off, and compared to here, the heart is even colder, and that is after drop. And that is one of the factors, along with the decrease in adrenaline and all that, that can cause you to collapse or die after rescue. So I'm gonna finish with talking about the rescue collapse. This is not water related, but a guy was in an avalanche for 2 hours, buried for 2 hours, and they got him out. They dug him out here after 2 hours. He was breathing, conscious, and able to move. And you can see, like, he brushed the snow off him and everything. And he stood up and started talking, despite the fact that the rescuers told him not to. And after 1 to 2 minutes, he lost consciousness and he died. And the postmortem determined that he had no internal trauma, and the cause of death was hypothermia due to rescue collapse. So, again, if you witness somebody, one of your buddies, dumping their kayak, and you can get them out in a reasonable amount of time, they might have post-rescue collapse, but it'll be just sort of on the mild end where they can't stand up. Just help them and get them out of the water. And if you're responding to someone, then by the time you get there, it's long enough to really be thinking that rescue collapse could be fatal. I will just point out, I'll end with this. When I was teaching a whitewater paddling course back in the day, we had a gal, it was a bunch of university age students, and we had one gal who was really the gal, the one in the group that, everything happened to and exaggerated everything. And we dumped and went, or she dumped and went for quite a long swim. Wow, 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most, probably 5. And finally came, where the water got a little more calm, and someone took her boat out, and she was sitting in the water, sort of up to her chest, and just sitting there. And we're yelling at her, just stand up and get out, And I didn't understand any of this stuff back then. This was 35, 40 years ago. And I was really mad at her, because I thought, you're just wasting all our time. Just stand up and get out of there. And sure enough, that was a case of post-rescue collapse. Now, she wasn't rescued, but there she was, sitting on the ground, so her adrenaline level's gone down, and she can't do anything. And she wasn't, being a turkey. She actually had a problem. But we didn't leave her there forever. We did finally get somebody went in the water and helped her out. But now I certainly understand that a bit more. Well, quite a bit more. I will tell you this. So there's a card here. I have emailed Kevin. I think it was Kevin I emailed.
Yeah, you did.
A paper on how to assess and how to treat somebody. It's called the cold card, and also just a PDF of this cold card. And it is very self-explanatory. You just read this list of in order and look at it, and it makes sense. You can tell by looking at consciousness, their movement, how much they're shivering, and how alert they are, whether they're mild, moderate, or severely hypothermic. And the back side of the card is how to care for them, how to wrap them up. And this is something you should really pay attention to. Yeah, it's part of the study that I'm doing in Denver right today. We had a person who has been an EMT for 8 years, and tried to do this procedure. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. And we all said, but basically, We have to find out where that person is working and make sure we never have an accident in their jurisdiction. So this is something that is not as simple as it looks. You can read this over, think about it. And these are all things that a group would have with them, like a tarp, a sleeping bag, sleeping pad. Basically, wrap them up like a burrito. Do it gently, keep them horizontal. You're probably not going to have any heat. I mean, there are chemical heaters noted in red here, but at the very least, you know, keep them gentle, wrap them up, and dry. Yeah, and basically that's it. And there's even something here on whether you should cut the clothing off or not, depending on time. You could just read, if you read this entire card, basically it summarizes everything that's in a 10-page paper in the consensus guidelines from the Wilderness Medical Society.